I've been asked to do a video explaining what Sovarchism is because naturally people don't just know words when we put them out there. So I want to explain why Sovarchism is different than both anarcho-capitalism and monarchism, right? And even voluntarism. Sovarchism is, of course, if you break up the word, it is two parts. Sov, as in sovereign, that's the etymology, sovereign. And then archism, or archy, which is rule, so it is the rule of sovereigns. Now you can say that monarchy is the rule of sovereigns, but I want to be specific with what I mean. Because it's better to argue over what a sovereign is than to adopt the term anarchy, because anarchy means no rulers. But with anarcho-capitalism, we know for a fact that there are types of rulers. People can have types of rulers. Of course, I mean, even with covenant communities, there are chances where you have a leader of people, right? So a sovereign, by the definition that we'll be using for Sovarchism, a sovereign is somebody who is not a subject or a servant or owned by any earthly master, right? And I won't even append anything else onto that. There's no need to append anything else onto that. Because even if you're a landless sovereign and you're in another sovereign's territory, you're still on equal footing with them, so long as you have not made them master over you, right? The natural law would be what would apply there, not their specific man-made laws or such and so on. So a sovereign is somebody who is owned by themselves. They own themselves. Nobody else is above them in the physical sense. Of course, everybody's under God, obviously. Nobody's truly sovereign, but that's the religious side. That's for me, right? So that is where you get the sovereign from. Nobody's over them. Archy should be self-explanatory. If you're in politics, you should know what rule is, what leadership is. Now you might be asking, why is there a sovereign over people if this is like anarcho-capitalism, right? Well, some anarcho-capitalists believe that you can have a voluntary subjugation. Some don't. There's a clash. Of course, there is Hans Hoppe, who believes that you can't do that because you can't relinquish ownership over your own brain, and if you're owned by someone, that means that you necessarily are giving them ownership of your brain. I disagree. It's very kind of semantical to me. If you sign up for a military contract, then you work for the military, right? That's your own choice. You make these choices yourself, and I believe if you own yourself, you have the right to make these choices. You have the right to go out and make the choices of how your life will go one way or another. Most people, especially, do not want to be sovereigns. That's a big issue with anarchism. It assumes that most people or either do or should want to be sovereigns. And I don't make that assumption. I don't believe that most people need to be sovereign over themselves. I mean, it might be a good goal, right? But people don't want that, and they shouldn't have that because naturally people do terrible things. That is why we need rulers. That is why there are rulers, right? There's even rulers over rulers, right? In the feudal times, there were kings that were over top of lords and vassals. So, of course, rulers need rulers, regular people need rulers. So, Sovarchism is at its core basis the acknowledgement that a person can submit themselves to higher authorities, and that the higher authorities must therefore be sovereigns. It shouldn't be the weird and messed up system that we have now, where currently, right now, you're owned by a public communal type of state. For one, that's one issue we could have, and there's nothing technically against Sovarchism where you could have a public state, where you could maybe look at Curtis Yarvin's neo-cameralism and how they own stocks in it. Still, it has one ruler, but technically it's that's privately owned, really. What am I talking about? But it's owned by multiple people, right? Another thing is that with Sovarchism, it still respects the individuality of the people. Most people may deserve to be ruled over, but here's a big but here. A lot of them should not be. At least, I believe it's been said once in a while, at least, maybe 1 in 20 people really should be sovereign, truly sovereign, right? And what does this 1 in 20 number give us? It gives us small tribes. It gives us small clans, right? Because if it's 1 in 20, then everybody would have a leader of their own small clan, right? And that's needed. Needed for, social well-being, because everybody waving an American flag, now we can tie many meanings to the American flag, but it's not connective. It's like waving a European Union flag or a world flag. Maybe you feel some connection to it, but if you wave the European Union flag, you don't just get, the French Revolution. You get everything that Germany did as well, right? You wave a world flag, you don't just get Martin Luther King, Gandhi. You get everything Germany did. You get Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong. All of that is encompassed, right? But with a local flag, you are waving part of your family, right? And there are bad parts, of course, but you yourself are the future. You are the growth, okay? You're not the growth of Germany, okay? You're not the growth of Germany. You're the growth of your family, okay? But if there are more questions, I can do a follow-up. And if anybody asks, well, could it be considered another type of anarchism, or, well, yes, really. I mean, we're proprietarian, yes, so I believe that property should be directly owned, right? There should be a direct ownership of property. You shouldn't infringe on other properties unless, you have to be conscripted by God and the Lord's army to do such a thing, or they infringed upon you first or something, right? But besides that, you should not infringe on other people's properties. You should respect their own self-governance. But if you want to manage your own sovereign community, your own sovarchy, then you can manage that in any type of way that is best and most prosperous for the people, so long as they agree. That's the basis. The basis is that the people should agree, right? They should agree. Differentiation here between feudalism and feudalism, not as bad as it really is. I'd still claim the term, but I'd call it voluntarist, okay? There's not a necessity where you're born into it. You can choose to leave at a certain point. That's the main discriminator here, or the main difference between us and, of course, feudalism. Because feudalism also wasn't just kings. It wasn't just kings, it wasn't just serfdom, it wasn't just manorialism. There were a lot of different government types under feudalism. There was even merchant governments, right? But it was noticeably decentralized. and accepting of hierarchy. And there were a lot of fights between the communities, but they weren't mandatory. Okay, when you get a big empire, it's like, who cares if there aren't fights between the communities? They're already being ruled over by a gigantic empire, so it's a constant fight. If you get rid of feudalism, then the turf war just gets turned into the U.S. police force, civil wars. Sometimes people cope and they do sports games. Not dogging on you if you do that. Not dogging on you. No hatred against that. But it's like it's a vestigial inside reaction to love your locality and want it to do well and support it. But a sports game is not representative of that, okay? You're trying to represent too many people, for one, and with people that usually don't represent them at all. They're rich sports players, right? So the big part here is, now you should know Sovarchism. I'll do a retelling, and I'll probably put this in a timestamp just so that people don't have to listen to my rambling. Sovarchism, okay? Sovereign leader owns himself, is not subjugated under another person, right? They are a ruler over other people who are either on his property or tied to some form of contract, right? And he makes their rules for them, right? And they submit to those rules voluntarily, at least initially, and it would be explicit that they could not leave the contract if that were the case. But that's the basis. That's the basis, yes. So, if you have any more questions about Sovarchy, then make sure to comment them below, and I will likely respond to them, maybe even with another video.